is our second Google Hangout on air for Backbones. And the topic that we will be covering today is sexuality, women with spinal cord injury. And our guest today is Ligia Zuniga Andrade from Sexability, and she is from the Bay Area in California, correct?
Correct.
All right, and so I'm excited to have you with us today and sharing with us everything that, all the work that you guys are doing with Sexability and just, being able to help other people after their injury and, sharing information that you have experienced as well as your experience working with other people. I know that you guys do a lot of work in this area. So I'd like to begin with you just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So my name is Ligia Zuniga Andrade. I'm from the Bay Area. I have a C5, C6 spinal cord injury. I'm a quadriplegic. My partner, Rafe Biggs, and I started working together about 2 years ago. He had originally had Sexability going, but was looking for a female aspect to the equation as well. And we met, and then our Sexability as we know it now was born. We are an organization that empowers people with disabilities to explore sexuality and create intimate, loving relationships. That's pretty much our mission, to focus on healthy relationships, healthy self-view, and just empowering people to really explore the beauty of themselves despite their disability and beyond their disability. We're trying to really transform what sexuality and disability means, and by that I mean changing the focus of what the mainstream society has taught us that sexuality is, and embracing who we are. We're working primarily with adults. We do lectures and presentations at universities, conferences, different local community colleges, different institutions, and we've just branched out to the youth. We worked with Yo Disabled and Proud a few months ago, where we trained the youth on sexuality and sexual abuse and how to explore that, especially because there is limited information for people with disabilities. Typically, people with disabilities are looked at as asexual, or that we can't control sexual impulses, or that we just have no desire, and society doesn't really view us as sexual or sexy, and we're really trying to change that and trying to transform that mentality.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you guys are doing that, especially with youth as well. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about how, for example, say someone who was recently injured came to you and was feeling like they weren't sexy or having issues, with their self-esteem and self-image. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we really focus in the beginning on the self and on who we are, or who we think we are, and how we view ourselves. Now, after an injury like this, or after any type of acquired disability, and I'm speaking from the experience of spinal cord injury primarily, and then from my own experience and other experiences that I've been able to observe, things change, mentality changes, self-esteem changes, self-image changes. So we really want to make sure that people understand how they've changed and where they're going. It's really difficult at first because there has to be also a level of acceptance, which then helps you in your own exploration of your sexuality and who you are at that moment. So again, there already has to be some sort of level of acceptance of the situation. It's not always there, and everybody has their own time, and it will come all in time. We try to be really patient because not everybody's at the same level, despite the length of their injury, length of time since their injury. So again, we really focus on self-identity, self-esteem, self-image, and self-worth. So for example, self-identity, it's how you identify to the world. Now, roles change, especially after you've acquired a disability. It also depends on your environment, your culture, your age, your family situation. I said roles like that change, and we really have to identify what has changed for us and how we see ourselves after our injuries. Self-esteem is really a judgment of who we are and how we view ourselves. Self-worth is how we value ourselves. I'm going to read a quote really quick that I really, really like and share with people. It says, "Let someone love you just the way you are, as flawed as you might be, as unattractive as you sometimes feel, and as unaccomplished as you think you are. To believe that you must hide all of the parts of you that are broken out of fear that someone else is incapable of loving what is less than perfect is to believe that sunlight is incapable of entering a broken window and illuminating a dark room." And that is by Mark Hack. And you know, when I read this, it really made me think about my own transformation after my injury. A lot of things go through your head. Who's going to love me? Am I ever able to have a partner again if that person doesn't have a partner? Will my partner still care for me? Will my partner still love me? Will I ever be sexual again? That's one of the biggest questions that we get, is will I ever be able to enjoy sex again? And it's one of the questions that we asked ourselves. And sex beyond the physical even, where there are things that we learn when we're able-bodied as what sex is, and it's not necessarily that way because we haven't even been able to understand our spirits and beyond the physical realm of what is life as we think it is. And now that we're injured, it has a completely different meaning and a completely different sort of place in the universe.
Do you guys offer tips for people, like if, let's say somebody is struggling with, creating that new identity for themselves?
So we also offer one-on-one coaching. People can go to our website, www.sexability.org, and they can access our emails and our phone numbers, but we never turn anybody away, and we negotiate with people depending on what they can afford and what they can do. We also have groups that we have throughout the Bay Area. We're starting some new ones here in this area where I am, in the San Mateo Bay Area. And then my partner, Rafe, had a group in Berkeley that's still going on. He's since let someone else start facilitating the groups, but it's the Sex and Disability Support Group at the Berkeley campus, at the Ed Roberts campus.
So that's an in-person. That's
right.
An in-person support.
We also offer Skype coaching, Google Hangout, whatever's accessible to that person. We try to make it as easy as possible.
You mentioned something about coming out as disabled. What does that mean?
So coming out has really been saved primarily for the gay and lesbian community. Now, there's also an aspect of being disabled that people sometimes don't, when they don't accept who they are. And it, like I said earlier, it's really all up to the person, and it's all in their time. It's part of self-acceptance to come out and say, I have a disability. We see that a lot, especially with the hidden disabilities. And there's people that don't really understand that a person can have a disability but quote-unquote look normal. And with us, after spinal cord injury, there are often times when people don't want to associate with people who are disabled. Or a friend of mine, he had a really hard time spending time with people who had a disability after his injury. He really only related to people who are able-bodied. And that was kind of part of him developing the acceptance that he had of himself. after his injury. So when we talk about coming out as disabled, is being comfortable with saying I have a disability, and that is part of the transformation of your identity, your self-esteem, your self-worth, how you identify to the world.
Yeah, I think that's important. I feel like once someone can accept the disability, then that, like you said, all the self-esteem, the self-image, all of that stuff follows.
Right. And all of that affects your sexuality. Because if you don't know who you are, you can't possibly try to figure out somebody else, or try to figure out how the world's going to see you. You first have to see who you are first, and then communicate to the world who you are, and present that, and project that. Because the more that we project insecurity, and the more that we project just like a discomfort in who we are, the less likely we are to be able to then explore our sexuality and explore having a partner, and having more of a, I guess, intimate life with someone else.
Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, you started talking about exploration. Can you expand on, self-exploration, both physically, emotionally, psychologically?
Sure. So we've been really focusing a lot on getting away from the finite sort of final part of what sex is always made to be, which is orgasm. I mean, it's great, but we try to go beyond that. That sex isn't all about the ultimate achieving an orgasm. That's not just what sex is. So in that, we have to explore our bodies. We have to explore what works for us. We have to explore what still feels good, how we can pleasure someone else, how they can pleasure us. Again, getting to know exactly who you are. That way you can communicate that to your partner or to other people. And it doesn't have to necessarily be physical. It can be emotional. It can be psychological. It doesn't always have to be the physical aspect of what sex is, although that's part of it. And we also teach a lot about communication throughout intimacy, because intimacy doesn't necessarily just have to be, again, sexual. It could also be with your friends, with your family. And so, again, communication is a huge part of that. So when we say self-exploration, like I said, we do talk about things that are, like, for example, for a quadriplegic that can feel from their chest up. There's different aspects of your body that you wouldn't necessarily think are erogenous, or think are sexy, or think that are pleasure oriented. For example, your ears, your neck, things like that. So we really try to help people explore other parts of their bodies that they wouldn't think would be, like I said, erogenous. You have to be very creative. After an injury like this, your life becomes a little more open than what you thought was the normality of it. We do get very creative, and we talk about adaptive equipment, adapting things in your home that you can use for sexual play or sexual experimentation, lubricants, massage devices, slings, Hoyer lifts, different things that can aid you in being successful in having a physical relationship. And then with emotional, just learning how to be intimate by communicating what you want and what you desire, and also being able to listen and accept what your partner might desire or might be open to as well. Keeping an open mind is very important, because again, we're taught in the able world, we're taught that certain things are a certain way. But when you have a disability, or when you have a different life situation, it's not necessarily that way. So again, staying open-minded, being creative is very important in your self-exploration.
I think that's a theme with just living with a disability and anything.
Yes,
Just stay open-minded,
absolutely.
do what works,
Absolutely. And do what works. Focusing on what works. A lot of us tend to look at ourselves, and that comes all with acceptance. It has to do with your self-esteem and your self-image. We think a lot about what we can't do anymore, instead of focusing on what we can do and encouraging others to as well. Yeah, there are a lot of things we cannot do, but there's still a lot of things we can do, and things that people may never even understand. And we can open that door to them and show them things that they would have never imagined, because you have to think differently.
What about, I mean, along with spinal cord injury, you know, because we're talking spinal cord injury, you know, there's the chronic pain, there's spasms, there's dysreflexia. What do you have to say about that? What, you know?
So that's another part that, again, with self-exploration and with knowing who you are, is communicating that. So many of us live with chronic pain. Many of us have severe spasticity. Autonomic dysreflexia is a big part of something we have to watch out for. For example,
someone who doesn't know what
yes,
autonomic is.
Absolutely. So autonomic dysreflexia is a reaction from the autonomic system and the nervous system, since they don't function like they used to, with the connections being connected from the brain to the body. Wherever there is that, the damage is where the nerve signal ends to communicate pain, discomfort, full bladder, full bowel, etc. So at that point, the body will compensate for it and will shoot up the blood pressure to alert the brain that there's something going on. But because our bodies and our mind, our bodies and our brains aren't connected in that way anymore, again, the body will somehow signal. So it will onset sweating, clamminess, a huge pounding headache, which ends up in a stroke, and that can end up in death. And it's very important to identify that and to know how to identify that in different sexual play or sexual activity and exploration. For example, using vibrators. So if a woman's going to use a high-powered vibrator, oftentimes the friction might cause a sore, right? Which will then, the body will tell you there's something going on, because you'll start to sweat. So it's, again, very important to be able to communicate that to your partner, and to be able to identify that for yourself. Again, with chronic pain, and you know, a lot of this is going back to communication, to being able to explain to your partner, or even just know about your own body, what feels good, what will relieve spasticity, what will relieve the autonomic dysreflexia, what will relieve the chronic pain, and being okay with that. But again, being able to communicate what will, I guess, what will still be able to happen regardless of that situation. So for example, for me, if I'm very, very cold, I get really spastic. So I know that before being intimate with my partner, I'm going to try to stay as warm as possible. And then communicating that to him, you know, I'm getting really cold, my spasms are getting kind of out of hand. Also, depending on how you're being moved, if you're moved too quickly, you know, there's just so many different things that our bodies experience. And being sensitive to your partner, because, like, for example, my partner also has a spinal cord injury, so he has different situations than I do with his own body. So for me too, I have to be able to listen and understand where he's coming from, and that it just makes the relationship better as well, because we're able to be open with each other and communicate our likes, dislikes, what happens with our bodies, and just have that type of intimacy. It's very important.
Would you be willing to share on a personal level any barriers right after your injury? Kind of share your story on that and how you were able to adjust?
Sure. So, you know, for me, I was in a car accident, and I have 2 children, and they were in the car with me when my car rolled over. And for me, I think what made it, not that it's okay, not that it was perfect all at once, but what helped me to accept it was that my children were okay, and I was the only one that was injured. And so my situation's unique to other people's, and other people might relate with that situation, but that's what, from my perspective, what happened. It took some time to really accept fully what had happened, because of what my reality was before my injury. Going from being completely independent to dependent is hard. So with the help of so many people in my network, people at our spinal cord injury peer groups in San Jose, California, a lot of people helped me just to be able to accept who I was and to see what life was beyond what I couldn't do. So eventually I had a partner, and we were engaged. Unfortunately, he passed away from autonomic dysreflexia, and that relationship really taught me a lot about who I was as a woman living with a disability, and also just intimately, because we were both quadriplegics. And that's something else we talk about as well, is negotiating with caregivers and being open with people that you trust on positioning you, on helping you set things up, just depending on your situation. If you have a partner that's not disabled, helping them understand how to maneuver and just do all that depending on what you're experiencing. So that relationship really taught me about being open with my caregivers. I had to have somebody help us when we were being intimate. So breaking down that, that insecurity of having to communicate that. So after that relationship, again, I really needed to go back again and see who I was. But it really showed me that this was a situation that was doable. It was manageable. And so now since then, I met someone else, and we've been together for 2.5 years now. And that relationship also, he's also quadriplegic, but that relationship has also taught me about patience, about who I am. He has a lot more mobility than I do, so he helps me with a lot. And again, breaking free from feeling like I'm so dependent all the time. He's really taught me that it's okay to ask for help, that it's okay to accept that part, that I'm not alone, that I don't have to go through this by myself. And again, asking for help is not a sign of weakness.
A big thing that's hard for people to accept, that it's okay to ask for help, any aspect
Right.
of our life, and it's important.
Yeah, and even before my injury, I would have never asked for help. Even in my deepest emotional difficulties, it was really hard for me to say even I need to talk to someone, and it really is very humbling to be able to see that as human beings we do need each other. And out of anything that this taught me was that I do need people in my life. I do need help. I do need love and support, and that's okay. And it's not being weak. It's part of humanity, and that's another thing that we focus on too in Sexability, is that everybody basically wants to be loved and wants to be accepted and wants to be nurtured. Everybody, it's a basic human need. There's studies done on babies that if you don't hold them and you don't talk to them, that they'll eventually not develop as well as they could if they were.
Is there anything else that you want to add, or just kind of let people know?
So actually, yes, I forgot to add that there are also people that cannot, they don't have access to their bodies, and they don't really have access to exploration on their own. There are people called sexual surrogates, and they are pretty much kind of like therapists. They help people explore their bodies, explore their sexuality, and there's a few websites and a few different places people can go to find information. And if people are interested, they can go to our website and get that information. We talk a lot about different types of herbs and different types of medications that men can use. We talk about childbirth, pregnancy, how to procreate after spinal cord injury for men and women. Also, getting access to the proper health care. We really try to communicate self-care and being mindful of your body, staying healthy, seeing the doctor regularly. It's really difficult for women with disabilities to be diagnosed with certain diseases and with certain conditions because we have less than adequate health care. So that's something that we really tried to communicate to different populations of people, to really be mindful of their bodies and to really keep themselves healthy. And we talk also about sexual abuse. People with disabilities are 10 times more likely to be abused than somebody who is not disabled. So that's very important to also communicate abuse prevention as well. And cultural competency, obviously, too. Some of our cultures are a little different when it comes to being open and exploring sexuality. So, again, we try to encompass a lot of different topics and a lot of different realities that people may have to help them then be able to explore their sexuality and, again, create intimate, loving relationships that are healthy.
Well, it sounds like you guys cover all the topics.
Stay tuned. We're in the process of writing a book. So that's our next endeavor. In the next year or so, we'll be able to provide that information tangibly for people. So, and if anybody's interested in any of our previous lectures or seminars, presentations, feel free to contact us. Again, www.sexability.org. Email us, give us a call. We're always willing to help with no matter what. Some people email us with questions, and that's totally fine. We're here to help. So it's never a bad time. And there's never a stupid question. People can really ask. We're very open as well with our own lives, trying to assist people in their exploration.
That's great. There's a lot of lack of information, so I'm glad that you guys
Yes.
have made yourselves available and a resource for people because it's definitely needed.
Definitely, and sex is such a topic that some people don't even want to touch, but it's a very human topic and a very necessary topic.
Thank you again, Vika. I'm gonna put the website up here, and I hope that people looking for information will contact you and get all the information they need. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much.